Republicans are banking on strong showings during the November elections as they try to turn states red during next year's high-stakes midterms.
Not only are we excited about keeping our red states red, but we see tremendous pickup opportunities across the country in places including Maine, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Kansas, and New Mexico. So a lot of momentum.
That was Arizona Governor Doug Ducey during the Republican Governors Association Conference. GOP governors from across the country talked about the state of the Republican Party during the annual meeting. So for more on the conference, I want to bring in CBS News political reporter Adam Brewster. He's following the latest from there in Phoenix. Are you in Phoenix, Adam? I don't know if I misspoke.
I am in Phoenix. I am in Phoenix. It is an early morning here in Phoenix.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we totally appreciate that.
To get
it did
some
look a
warm
little
weather
dim where
in
you
November.
are. Yes. So let's talk about this. Republicans are already gearing up for the 2022's high-stakes midterm. How are Republicans feeling about next year's elections?
Long story short, at this moment in time, they feel pretty good, Anne-Marie, certainly with what they saw a couple of weeks ago, not just in Virginia, but also better than expected performance in New Jersey. You heard RGA Chairman Doug Ducey list off some of the states that they think that they're going to be able to take control of next year. Republicans are eyeing upwards of 10 states that are currently held by Democratic governors to target. Now, certainly, it will be difficult to win all 10 of those, but they at least have their eye on them. That includes some of those battleground states that Governor Ducey listed, places like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, other battlegrounds like Nevada. But they're even saying, hey, bluer states like Connecticut or Minnesota could be in play, depending on what the national mood is like a year from now. They're feeling really good about what they saw in those 2021 elections and the issue set that they think that they can focus on heading into next year as potentially being a strong year for Republicans running. Now, of course, a lot of that will come down to who the candidates are in these races that the Republicans put forward.
So speaking of Doug Ducey, he was asked about a potential primary challenge for Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Here's what he had to say.
The RGA is in the business, of course, of supporting our incumbents and ultimately electing Republican governors. And that's going to continue to be our focus.
So we've heard what Ducey is saying about potential challengers. What role are primaries playing for GOP incumbents?
The RGA acknowledges this is sort of new territory for them to have so many of their incumbents facing primary challenges. Now, not all of those are necessarily serious or formidable primary challenges, but they acknowledge that they're going to have to, spend some financial resources in places likely helping their incumbents, and that would be, mostly positive messaging about what those incumbents have accomplished, and that'll be decided sort of on a state-by-state race-by-race case, right? It is going to look at the financial resources that different governors have, how serious those primary challenges are. Certainly a lot of eyes are on Georgia to see whether former Senator David Perdue jumps in to challenge Governor Kemp. That would be one that would be, certainly a serious challenge. Republicans have said, at the end of the day, they don't want to speak ill of other Republicans. That's something Doug Ducey said, citing, Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, don't speak ill of another Republican. But it'll be a new challenge, right? Our RGA Executive Director Dave Rexford said, look, even during the Tea Party era, our governors didn't really face incumbents when House and Senate members were facing primary challenges. And he said that's partly because governors only run for one term, and there was, not people who were hanging around for years and years and years on end. But this is certainly going to cause them to look at things and have to potentially expel some resources that they haven't otherwise had to in the past. A new wrinkle, I would say, in the race before they get to those general elections next year.
So there was a bit of a special guest there, not yet a member of the family, but soon to be a member of the family, Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin from Virginia. Did he have any advice on how to run a successful campaign? Because after all, he was able to win out over the incumbent, the Democratic incumbent.
Yeah, I would say he was certainly welcomed with wide open arms at this conference. And you sort of saw governors heap praise on him, right, and say, this is the model. This is someone who ran, a very solid issue-based race, someone who talked about Virginia issues and tapped into the things that Virginians were concerned about. And we think that that is a way that we want our candidates to be running races next year. Governor Greg Abbott of Texas said that Glenn Youngkin did a great job contrasting his vision for Virginia against Terry McAuliffe's and sort of kept that as a focus of his campaign. And as for Youngkin, he said, look, it was focusing on issues. Those things may change depending on each state, right? These governor elections all happen within the context of what issues are important to the voters within their state. Obviously, the national mood certainly plays a role in that as well. And he said, look, you have to paint a forward-looking vision rather than just looking backwards. That is something that he felt was important, but certainly he was held up as a bit of a model of what Republicans may want to see, especially from those first-time candidates challenging incumbents in the 2022 elections.
And what about the long shadow of the former president, Donald Trump? Did they talk about his impact, his influence, the level at which, or the role he should play moving forward?
The role was often said, that's going to be up to the candidate to decide, right? Again, looking at, hey, in some states, basically acknowledging, hey, in some states, he may be more helpful than others. Going back to what Glenn Youngkin said, right? Glenn Youngkin said, I want to campaign for myself. I don't want the former president coming. Of course, the former president is not, the most popular figure in Virginia or New Jersey, so he didn't necessarily play a large role in either of those elections. That may be harder to do in battleground states like Arizona or Georgia or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or Michigan. But, Glenn Youngkin said, I certainly built a large coalition of voters, and former President Trump helped with that, right? So this was not him saying, keep him at a distance. This is saying you got to decide how much you want to be involved based on your own race. The other governors, though, they were not shy about praising former President Trump's policies, certainly on things like immigration or energy policies. There was a lot of saying, we missed the way things were back when he was in charge. Not surprising things, right, to hear from a bunch of Republican governors talking about a former Republican president. So he was certainly brought up within the context of the model that he set in terms of policies that they want to enact. And that was the context with which he was most frequently discussed by governors.
Adam Brewster, thank you very much.
Thanks, Anne Marie.